Chasing the Sun 2 might be the best sports documentary ever made. The finale, episode 5, dropped last night. This is my instant reaction, my review, and a couple of things that I want to bring up and talk about. As always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you haven't, please hit that subscribe button. Still about 92% of you who watch this channel on a regular basis are not subscribed. We want to get that number way down, and as always, leave this video a like. Let's jump straight in to the finale of Chasing the Sun. So the first major talking point in episode 5 is the whole Bongi situation with Tom Curry. Now, basically what happens is Tom Curry comes up to the ref in the semi-final where England versed the Springboks and basically said that Bongi called him a very derogatory term. Bongi goes on to say in the documentary that he had no idea during the game and only found out when he got to the hotel afterwards. Now, whether he said this or not, World Rugby eventually concluded that there wasn't enough information or evidence to sort of pin this on Bongi. But what we did get an insight to is the English media and how they absolutely hounded the South African coaching staff and the players about this situation. And once it was resolved, that nothing really was said by the English media. It's clear to see that the South Africans, the Springboks, don't take too kindly to the English media and the sort of these scenarios that they spin. Look, whether Bongi said it or not is besides the fact. He was proven innocent. What was a little bit frustrating is that England tried to maybe distract the Springboks a little bit off of that final with all of these allegations in the lead up to that final. Obviously, South Africa only beat England by 1 point, so maybe there was a little bit of sour grapes. They even brought up an incident from a year before that. So whether he said that or not, we'll never know. Only Bongi and Bonambi will know that. But what is said is that he's innocent. And what is beautiful is that how South Africa got behind Bongi in that scenario. The jokes that were being made. And I think being a South African living in South Africa, there's bigger problems that South Africans face on a daily basis. We've been through apartheid. We've sort of closed that book and we're moving on now. And it was very, very cool to see every shape, form, race get behind Bongi and Bonambi and defend him because South Africa has moved past that. There's bigger issues to worry in South Africa. So I would love to hear what you guys think on that whole Bongi and Bonambi situation. But now let's get into that final. South Africa taking on New Zealand, the build-up, and then obviously the game. So in the build-up to the final, they sort of build up the whole New Zealand-South African rivalry that it's been going on for longer than 100 years. It started in 1921. And if you're a South African, if you're from New Zealand, then you know how big this clash is. We play New Zealand almost every year, and every single year it's an absolute battle. But in the World Cup, and I think prior to the World Cup, a lot of people sort of forgot about New Zealand or underestimated them, and that is not what you want to do against the All Blacks. Obviously, they had a very, very good group stage. Then they knocked out Ireland in the quarterfinals, which was an absolutely massive result. And then they had an easy semi-final against Argentina, kind of just cruised through them. And then they were all of a sudden in the final and the Springboks had to face them. And as we know, in the 2019 World Cup, when we faced them in the group stages, we ended up losing to New Zealand. If you're a South African, you know how big this clash is. It's unlike any other rivalry in rugby. And any team, the All Blacks or the Springboks, could have won on that day. So once they've started to build that up, it's going to be whoever wins this will be the first nation to 4 World Cups. There was a lot on the line in this final. And then they move on into the preparation for this New Zealand and South African clash. Through all the Bongi and Bonambi drama, they still have to stay focused on the job at hand. And you sort of get an inside look into the coach's room and them in real time discussing for what bench split they should go for. Should they go for a 5-3, the conventional, or will New Zealand outpace them, outlast them if they go for a 5-3? Should they go a little bit safer than a 7-1 and play a 6-2? But then again, Rassie isn't too sold on that. And Rassie ultimately says to the boys, should we not just take a chance and only have Willie Leroux on the bench? I like Rassie Rasmus's thinking behind this. He did have to negotiate and convince the other coaches, but his sentiment was, let's go all in, throw everything we have at them. If we win, we win. If we lose, we lose. At least we can say that we threw absolutely everything at the All Blacks to try and beat them in the final. Now, the big problem with the 7-1 is that there's only one backline player on the bench, and if Faf gets injured in that game and you don't have a reliable number 9, then the entire game could shift. So in real time, they message Cheslin Colby, bring him into the coach's room, and Rassie basically says to him, listen, but are you comfortable playing in that number 9 position if it has to be done? And Cheslin Colby, the champion that he is, says, yeah, I just have to get some reps in. So that was it. The 7-1 split was announced for the final, which was an absolutely massive call. All the pundits, overseas media said that this was the boldest bench selection in rugby history because it's in a Rugby World Cup final. There's no bigger stage. No one's ever done a 7-1 split in a World Cup final. No one's ever done a 7-1 split in a World Cup before Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber did that with the Springboks. And basically, Rassie has this team talk with the players a couple days before and says, boys, we're risking it all here. We're going for a 7-1 split, and the only way this works is if we absolutely destroy New Zealand physically. That is the game plan. We have to go in there and we have to start hot and we have to absolutely kill them up front. If we don't do that, we're not going to win the World Cup. Everyone's going to laugh at us for the 7-1 splits, and he lays it on the line. He says, this is what's going to happen. If we don't do it, this is what's going to happen. And he's very open and forward-facing with the players. Now, there was a couple of issues besides the only having one back on the bench, and that was that Manie Lebok and Kobus Reinach started the semi-final, and now you have to tell them, look, you're not going to be playing any part in the final. To be fair to them, they took it on the chin. They served the team that week, and they did a very, very good job at that. The other problem was that Deon Fourie was not 100% going into this final. He had a bit of a shoulder tweak, and he speaks about it in the final where he gets a hit and he knows he can't come off because Bongi Bonambe has been injured, and if he goes off, the Springboks have to play with 14 men. So the more you look at it, the more risky this plan was. But in a South African way, in a Rassie way, in a Jacques Nienaber way, they go all in. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But at least they can say that they went all in. Then in another team meeting, Jacques Nienaber is busy speaking, and he's busy speaking about rewriting your script, which I thought was a very, very powerful message, not only for the Springboks, for the whole of South Africa, even the world. He says that a lot of you sitting here weren't meant to be here, but you rewrote your story, you worked hard, and you got to the place here. New Zealand are absolutely criticizing you. They're underestimating you. They think you're just a hurdle for them to get over. And Felix Jones kind of goes into how the rugby world sort of discredits what the Springboks are doing. In 2019, they were playing boring rugby. Now they move the ball a bit and they criticize the bench split. So there's always going to be something negative to say about the Springboks, but I do think that sort of 3 to 5 minute clip of Jacques Nienaber really pouring his heart out to the players just shows how much a World Cup and rugby means to Jacques Nienaber and these players, saying that you guys have come from nothing in your own personal lives and you rewrote the story. Let's go and rewrite the story on Saturday on the biggest stage in a World Cup final. And then Saturday comes and it's the day of the final, the biggest day in rugby that is possible every 4 years, and you can kind of see the mood changes. It goes from this sort of very relaxed, still focused, but now it's very intense. No one's speaking. The vibe has completely changed. Everyone's in the zone and they are focused. And before they go out on the field, I was very impressed by Handré Pollard. You can definitely see that he's one of the major leaders in the Springbok outfit, because he said the speech before kickoff. He said a speech at halftime, and he really had a very, very good game and controlled that game as every good fly half should. Then they kick off, and it started. The final has started. I can remember watching this final, being extremely nervous for it. Again, I'm going to come back to South Africans know how big it is to play against New Zealand, and it was scripted absolutely perfect that New Zealand and South Africa meet in the final for the first time since 1995. And if you're South African, you know how big that 1995 World Cup was for South Africa. Then in just the 3rd minute, we get the first piece of drama. Bongi Bonambe gets injured, something with his knee. It looked very, very bad. But then it brings in another storyline. Deon Fourie has to come on in a World Cup final and play 77 minutes with a little bit of an injured shoulder in a position that he doesn't normally play, in hooker. He normally plays flank, and he came on and played hooker for 77 minutes, and he was one of the players of the matches. It was absolutely insane, the amount of BMT, the cool-headedness he had to go in there in a World Cup final and put in that performance that he did. Also, what I found interesting was how efficient it is to get a message from the coaching box to Sia on the field. Rassie Erasmus was screaming that Bongi Bonambe must come off. He doesn't want a passenger on that field. If he's not 100%, we put Deon on. And that message got to Sia like this, through the water boy to Sia Khaleesi, and then Bongi ended up coming off. It also shows how much faith and trust Rassie Erasmus has in every single player on that field. He trusted Bongi Mbonambe to start. He gets injured in the 3rd minute. He says, Bongi, if you're not 100%, we send Deon Fourie on. He can do the job. And that's exactly what he did. And once that substitute is made, then the Springboks are absolutely on top for the entire first half. Pieter-Steph is making outrageously big hits on Jordie Barrett. That was probably one of the best games I think Pieter-Steph du Toit has played in his life. Eben Etzebeth was making absolutely huge hits. He made a hit on Richie Mwanga within sort of 2 minutes. And they were just absolutely dominating. The problem is that they weren't getting any tries. They were kicking penalties, but New Zealand always felt like they were just there. You were just waiting for New Zealand to get a little bit of momentum. They were sort of lying and waiting. You knew a wave of New Zealand was going to come. And then at the end of the second half, Sam Cane gets a red card for a high hit on Jesse Kriel. And as satisfying as that was, when I think back to it in the final, it probably revved New Zealand up even more. They wanted to come at you even more. They knew they had to give that extra little bit of effort. And as we know now, that's exactly what they did. The last little play before the halftime break was when Kurtley Arendse tackled Rico Ioane out in the corner. A much, much smaller man, but he got over there. He took Rico Ioane out and saved a certain try. And that again just shows the confidence that Rassie and Jacques Nienaber have in their players, the confidence that the players have, and how much it means to them. So the Springboks go into halftime 12-6 up, an absolutely dominant first half. Handré Pollard gives a very, very good halftime speech, followed by Eben Etzebeth. They just basically said that we have to keep the energy up. New Zealand are going to come at us even harder in the second half. They have absolutely nothing to lose. They're trailing and they're going to throw the absolute kitchen sink at it. Now, South Africa got off to the better start in that second half. They probably should have scored 1 or even 2 tries right after the second half, but Jordie Barrett held Delende up over the line, and basically they got away with murder there. If South Africa had scored a try or 2 there, that was the game done. But we know New Zealand, we know the All Blacks, they always just keep themselves in the game, and you knew that something was coming. Sonny Bill Williams, who was in Chasing the Sun, said that he was quietly confident. He knew that they were going to come into their own at some point, and that's exactly what they did. Siya Kolisi gets a red card for a high hit on Ardie Savea, and then the entire momentum of the game changes. Now New Zealand are on the attack. The Boks are just hanging on, but they're defending, they're making hits, they're scrapping for everything that they are worth, but they just could not hold out that New Zealand side, eventually scoring in the corner. They missed the conversion. What was funny is that Deon Fourie actually became captain when Siya Kolisi went off, so he wasn't meant to start. He basically started and then became a captain of the Springboks in a World Cup final. And this is when Felix Jones says, we knew this was going to the final minute. The score was 12-11. Kwaka came on at some point and he absolutely started to make a difference. He showed why South Africa goes for a 7-1 split, because that bomb squad, that nuke squad comes on and changes the game. They're very vital in turnovers, in hits, but we also saw the back end of a 7-1 split with Cheslin Colby cramping and Vali LaRue saying he has to finish the game. There's no one else to come on off the bench for him. So if there's too many injuries in the backline, it is a very, very risky move. But for this game, for the Springboks, with the players that the Springboks had on the bench, it was the perfect game plan. Cheslin Colby then gets a yellow card in the 72nd minute. It's 12-11. 8 minutes to go, and now the Springboks must just defend. And that's exactly what they do. They defend. And finally, I thought in sort of the last minute when Kriel got the ball there on the 10 meter, I don't think he should have kicked that. I thought that when it happened live, he kicked it straight to Damian McKenzie, and we know how dangerous Damian McKenzie is, but it wasn't meant to be. The All Blacks eventually knock it on. They go for the scrum, and that is the final whistle. The Springboks become back-to-back champions. In a game where almost every player stepped up, but Handré Pollard, impressive. Pieter-Steph du Toit, probably one of the best games I've ever seen him play. Kwaka Smith coming off the bench and turning 3 or 4 balls over, and Deon Fourie for coming on in the 3rd minute of a World Cup final in a position he doesn't play and got the job done. And you can just see what winning the World Cup means to the Springboks and to South Africa. It can absolutely change the whole mood of South Africa on a dime like this. That sport carries South Africa on its back. And if you're not South African, I don't expect you to understand, because I don't think rugby has such a culture, an ingrained culture in a nation other than South Africa. But that just shows how powerful the Springboks are, how powerful rugby is as a whole. And I want to finish off by saying what the commentator said. This is a team driven by purpose, not by trophies. And I think that encapsulates the Springboks absolutely perfectly. Without a doubt, I think this is one of the best sports documentaries ever made. I cannot wait for Chasing the Sun 3, as Damian Willems has said right at the end. As always, let me know what you guys think down in the comments. If you haven't hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Take it easy. Peace.